Story number 1, meter Route 33. I arrived at the unmanned well station 17 miles outside Burns at 9:30 in the morning. The quarterly meter reading was routine. I had done this particular site 4 times in 14 months without incident. The access road was graded but empty. No vehicles, no personnel. The gate was open. Protocol requires the gate to remain locked between service visits. The padlock lay in the gravel near the fence post. I examined it for signs of forced entry, shackle damage, housing fracture, corrosion. There was nothing. The lock was intact. It had simply been opened and set down. I logged the observation and proceeded to the meter housing. The structure is a small concrete block building, roughly 8 by 10 feet, with a single steel door and a ventilation grate on the east-facing wall. I unlocked the door with my assigned key and stepped inside. The meter readout was the first clear problem. The digital display showed a consumption rate of 417,000 gallons per quarter. The previous reading, taken 13 weeks prior, had been 59,000 gallons. The station serves only irrigation infrastructure that had been offline since August. There should have been minimal consumption, perhaps a few thousand gallons for system maintenance and testing. I photographed the meter display and the surrounding panel for the discrepancy report. That was when I noticed my phone's timestamp was no longer advancing normally. I opened the clock application to verify the time. It showed 9:32. I waited 30 seconds and checked again. The timestamp had jumped backward to 9:17. I waited another minute. It cycled to 9:04, then forward to 9:28, then back to 9:11. The intervals were irregular, between 3 and 11 minutes of loss with each refresh. I was still examining the phone when I heard the pump activate. The sound came from inside the housing structure, a low mechanical whine that built into a steady rhythmic pulse. I turned to the control panel. All systems displayed standby mode. The pump indicator light was dark. The manual override switch was still locked in the off position, secured with a secondary safety pin that I had installed during the previous visit. The pump continued running. I attempted to contact dispatch using the two-way radio mounted in my vehicle. I had to step outside the housing to get clear signal. The dispatcher acknowledged my call, but reported that the site showed no active equipment status in the remote monitoring system. They instructed me to perform a visual inspection of the pump housing and report back. I returned to the meter housing. The pump was still running. The sound was steady and unchanged. I checked the temperature gauge mounted on the interior wall. It read 72 degrees, which matched the external air temperature, but my breath was visible. I could see it clearly, a small cloud of condensation forming in front of my face with each exhale. I waited for my eyes to adjust. The gauge still read 72 degrees. The pump ran for 41 minutes. I timed it. During that period, I attempted 3 additional radio contacts with dispatch. Each time, they reported no change in system status. Each time, I could hear the pump clearly. The sound never wavered. The temperature inside the housing continued to drop. After 20 minutes, I could no longer see the gauge clearly because of the frost forming on its face. I made the decision to shut down the main breaker without authorization from the regional supervisor. This was a protocol violation. Unauthorized system shutdown requires supervisory approval and incident documentation before action. I did not wait for approval. I opened the breaker panel and switched the main disconnect to the off position. The pump sound stopped immediately. The temperature did not normalize. My breath remained visible. The frost on the gauge did not recede. I waited 5 minutes. Nothing changed. I evacuated the housing and returned to my vehicle. From the vehicle, using binoculars, I observed the meter readout through the housing window. The digital display continued to increment. I watched it for 3 minutes. It added 9,000 gallons every 6 minutes, cycling upward with mechanical precision despite the breaker being in the off position. I filed an equipment malfunction report and left the site at approximately 2:15 in the afternoon. My vehicle's clock indicated 11:53. My phone showed 4:37. Neither device had been in contact with external time correction services since I had entered the housing. 3 days later, I received notification that the site had been reclassified for maintenance deferral. No reason was provided. My route assignment was modified to exclude all unmanned stations in Harney County. No replacement scheduling was offered. No explanation was given. The incident file was closed and archived on the same date the reclassification was issued. Story number 2, holding pattern. I arrived at the Ridgewood property at 1400 hours on a Tuesday in November. The safe house was a 2-story colonial on a quiet street, the kind of place that blends into suburban inventory without drawing attention. My assignment was straightforward: pre-occupancy security sweep for a protected witness scheduled to arrive in 72 hours. I had done this work for 8 years. The procedure is reliable. I started with the exterior perimeter. The property manager had confirmed all entry points were secured 48 hours prior. The front door was locked. The windows on the ground floor were intact. I moved to the rear of the house and found the back door ajar. I noted the time and photographed the frame. No visible damage. The lock appeared functional. I checked the property manager's log and confirmed the door had been locked and verified during the final walkthrough. I did not enter immediately. I called dispatch and reported the discrepancy. They advised me to proceed with caution and wait for backup from the regional office, approximately 40 minutes away. I waited 15 minutes. I used that time to check the windows again and walk the perimeter a second time. Nothing else was disturbed. I made the decision to enter and conduct an initial assessment rather than wait. The house was empty. It had been empty for 3 weeks. The interior was cold. The heat had not been activated. I moved through the ground floor systematically, documenting the layout, checking closets, verifying that all rooms were empty and showed no signs of forced entry or occupancy. The kitchen appliances were disconnected. The living room was bare. I found no surveillance devices, no signs of tampering, no indication that anyone had been inside. I moved upstairs. The hallway was dim. The afternoon light came through a single window at the far end. I was documenting the primary bedroom when I noticed the wet footprints. They began at the bathroom doorway and led across the hallway into the primary bedroom. I counted 9 distinct prints, bare feet, moving in a straight line. The floor was cold. The prints were wet. I checked the bathroom immediately. The toilet was dry. The sink was dry. The shower had no water. All plumbing had been winterized in September. The house had no active water supply. I verified this with the property manager's checklist. Water had been shut off at the main valve. I photographed the footprints from multiple angles. I did not touch them. I called dispatch again and reported the anomaly. My transmission broke up. The signal strength on my equipment showed full bars, but the dispatcher's response was fragmented. I heard, "Copy that," and then nothing. I tried again. Same result. I waited and tried a third time. This time the connection held long enough for them to confirm backup was unroute. I remained in the upstairs hallway. I did not enter the primary bedroom. I did not follow the footprints further. I waited. 20 minutes later, I photographed the footprints again. They were still wet. The floor around them had not dried. I counted the prints a second time. There were 14 distinct tracks where I had initially documented 9. The new prints were smaller, following the same path as the original 9, but offset slightly, as though someone had been walking beside the first set. I did not wait for backup. I descended the stairs and exited through the front door. I locked it behind me. I called dispatch from my vehicle and reported that the house was compromised. I did not specify the nature of the compromise. I recommended the property be sealed and that alternative placement be arranged for the protected witness. I stated that the house was unsuitable for program use. Dispatch acknowledged my assessment. They did not ask for clarification. They did not request supplementary documentation. They told me to return to the regional office and await further instruction. My supervisor, Assistant Director Marcus Webb, reviewed my abbreviated field report the following morning. He did not ask me to elaborate. He did not ask me to provide photographs or detailed measurements. He did not ask me to file a formal incident report. He accepted my assessment and reassigned the witness to a facility in Pennsylvania. The reassignment was processed within 4 hours. The Ridgewood property was reclassified as unsuitable for program use. It was returned to the regional office with a notation in the property log that I was instructed not to elaborate on. The notation consisted of a single line, structural integrity compromised. Recommend demolition or extended vacancy. I was assigned to desk evaluation for 6 weeks following the incident. During that time, I processed security clearances, reviewed surveillance footage from other safe houses, and updated procedural documentation. I was not asked to provide testimony about what I had observed. I was not asked to submit supplementary documentation. No one from the office visited the Ridgewood property to conduct their own assessment. On the 42nd day of my desk assignment, I received a memo informing me that the Ridgewood incident had been archived and classified under Protocol 7 Delta. The memo stated that no further action was required and that I was cleared to return to field operations. It also stated that discussion of the incident with personnel outside the immediate chain of command was prohibited. I returned to field work. I have conducted 23 pre-occupancy sweeps since November. I have not been assigned to the Ridgewood property again. No one has asked me about it. The file remains closed. Story number 3, Dosage reconciliation. I arrived at Clearwater State Psychiatric Hospital on November 3rd, 2023, at 8 in the morning. The facility sits on a ridge overlooking a pine forest in rural Maine, about 40 miles from the nearest town. I had been assigned to conduct the annual Controlled Substance Inventory Audit, a routine task I had performed at 12 other facilities over the preceding 5 years. The work is methodical. I verify stock against logbooks, cross-reference administration records with patient files, and generate a compliance report. It typically takes 2 days. Helen Drummond met me in the administrative office. She was the facility pharmacist, a woman in her early 60s with gray hair pulled back in a braid. She had worked at Clearwater for 19 years. She seemed competent and professional during our initial briefing. She walked me through the locked dispensary on the 2nd floor, showed me the storage protocols, and provided me with the logbooks dating back to the facility's opening in 1990. 8. The records showed standard usage patterns. Antipsychotics, sedatives, and mood stabilizers were dispensed according to documented patient needs. Nothing appeared irregular on the surface. The physical count began at 9:30. I worked methodically through each shelf, comparing the ampules and tablets against the inventory list. Most stock was current, manufactured within the last 3 to 5 years. But on the fourth shelf, behind a row of haloperidol vials, I found a series of chlorpromazine ampules with manufactured dates from 1971. I pulled several down and checked the dates again. 1971. The facility did not open until 1998. I asked Helen about this directly. She was standing near the doorway, watching my work. When I held up one of the ampules, her expression changed. She did not answer immediately. Then she said the ampules had always been there, and that they were reserved for what she called legacy patients. She said this in a matter-of-fact way, as though it explained something. I asked what legacy patients meant. She did not answer. I asked to see the patient medication administration records that corresponded with the vintage stock. Helen retrieved a separate logbook from a locked drawer. The records showed 17 patients receiving chlorpromazine from the 1971 batch, consistently, over a period of 30 years. All 17 patients shared the same admission date, August 14, 1971. The facility had not existed on that date. I requested to verify these patients were currently in residence. Helen hesitated. Then she said they were in Ward C and that she would take me there. She went to a locked box in the basement and retrieved a key. I had not been provided with any map that included a Ward C. The facility's official schematic showed only Wards A, B, and D. Ward C was on the east side of the basement, accessible through a corridor I had not seen during my initial tour. The air was cooler there. Helen unlocked the door. The ward contained 17 beds arranged in 2 rows. All 17 beds were occupied. All 17 patients were awake, sitting upright, staring forward. They did not move when we entered. I checked their faces against the patient photographs in the files Helen had provided. The photographs were dated from 1971. The patients in the beds appeared to be roughly the same age as the people in the photographs. This was impossible. 52 years had passed. I asked Helen to explain this. She did not respond. I asked to speak with the ward supervisor. Helen said there was no supervisor assigned to Ward C. I asked when these patients had last been evaluated by a physician. Helen said she did not have that information. I asked to see their current medical records. Helen said the records were archived. I attempted to contact my regional supervisor. My cell phone showed no signal. The facility's landline phones produced a steady tone that was not a dial tone or a busy signal. I tried 3 different phones. All produced the same tone. Helen watched me try each one. She did not offer to help. I returned to the dispensary and completed the inventory count. The numbers were accurate. All stock was accounted for. I documented the vintage ampules in my report with a notation that flagged the facility for an unannounced re-audit within 12 months. Helen asked me to sign off on the inventory as compliant. I did. She asked me to initial a separate form indicating that all documentation inconsistencies had been resolved under what she called grandfathered administrative structures. I did not recognize this classification. It does not exist in any regulatory framework I have encountered. I asked her to clarify. She did not answer. I signed the form. I left the facility at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. My phone regained signal as I drove down the access road. I called my regional supervisor Thomas Vance, and reported the discrepancies. I told him about the vintage stock, the 17 patients with impossible dates, and Ward C. I told him about the logbooks and the photographs. Vance listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was silent for several seconds. Then, he said the facility had been operating under certain legacy protocols for administrative purposes, and that the matter had been flagged in my briefing materials. I told him it had not. He said it had been addressed in the preliminary documentation. I told him there was no preliminary documentation. He said the inventory report would be filed as compliant with a notation for routine follow-up. I said that was not appropriate given what I had observed. He said the matter was closed and that I should consider it a record-keeping issue, requiring no further action. I completed my written report the following day and submitted it with the standard compliance notation. 3 weeks later, I received a reassignment notice. I have been transferred to a regional audit position that does not require facility visits. My supervisor's contact information was changed. The file on Clearwater State Psychiatric Hospital was marked archived and restricted. I have not been asked to return there. The matter is closed.